Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's presentation. I'm just going to share my screen shortly, but I hope everybody can hear me. Okay. Someone please confirm that I'm now in the presentation mode.
Yes, you are. It's looking really good.
Okay. Okay, all right. Good evening again. My name is Phuthumani Mlotshwa, and tonight I'm going to be presenting on this quite interesting topic. Something I think is that's quite relevant for the times we're in, and has got its place in the practice of global health. So without much further ado, I'm just going to move on. And just as a way of introducing myself, I am a Master in Global Health graduate from Karolinska Institute in Sweden, but with a background in biomedical sciences, having done biomedical sciences from at the University of Zimbabwe. And currently I'm practicing as a biomedical scientist in Zimbabwe, in Bulawayo to be particular. And as well, I am affiliated to research at the Karolinska Institute Department of Global Public Health. And at the same time, I am the coordinator of the Decolonizing Minds project with the Swedish Organization for Global Health, which is where this concept of decolonizing minds started. And I'm just going to get into the objectives for today. I'm not going to be lecturing, just in case someone thought I'm going to be lecturing, but my objectives, I only have 3 objectives. And the first one is to inspire introspection about the things that we're going to talk about. And the second one is to probe for more conversations, because it's through conversations that we are impacted, and it's through conversations that mindsets are changed and for the better. And the third objective is to contribute toward mindset shifts towards equity. And what the vision for the organization that sparked the Decolonizing Minds concept in me. The vision for SOGH is to strive towards a world that is free of inequities. So this invitation to speak today fits into that. And just to continue and get into the subject matter, I'm sure other people have been asking themselves what decolonizing minds is and what does it mean to each one of us who are in this meeting today. And unfortunately, I'm not going to give some scholastic definition of what it is, because it's a fairly new concept, I presume, and it means different things to different people in different contexts. That's why it's not that easy to define. But as something that's based on colonialism, which is something that's been clearly defined in literature and in dictionaries, maybe we can we can start from there and build from that. As I was just looking for the most fitting definition of colonialism, this is the one that I came across, which is acquiring full or partial political control over another country or entity and exploiting it economically through policy or practice. And if we were to look into that and sort of like reverse engineer, then Decolonizing Minds has got something to do with undoing that. I guess that's the most that's the simplest definition that I could give. And this Decolonizing Minds is not that separate from the movement that's been going on in universities and colleges and companies, the Decolonizing Global Health movement, which was, I think, sparked by events that happened in the US in 2020, but it's something that had been brewing for a few years, as seen through some of the chapters in universities that started working on this in 2018. And Decolonizing Minds fits into this picture. And one of the people that have written so much about the subject of decolonizing global health from the larger perspective, they have highlighted that if you look at the design, structure, and teaching and practice of global health, you'll find that there is something that's not that well aligned, and that's how this movement of decolonizing global health emerged. Because as younger folk, we've been discovering that no, there is a disconnect between what's, for instance, being taught as one of the components, the teaching part. You realize that no, there is a disconnect between the what's being taught and what's currently on the ground. Because if you look at the way this subject is taught, it's being taught mostly in high income countries, but most of the research is being done, the research and the work is being done in low and middle income countries. So there is that disconnect, and that calls for some sort of like undoing or restructuring what we have inherited as younger global public health practitioners. So I'm going to look into some of the side effects or the effects of colonialism that need to be undone. And looking at the whole ecosystem of global public health is something that was created, obviously. Everything that we have, the systems that we have, they are a construct of someone's thinking, someone's mindset, or a group of people's mindsets, or the people that have gone before us. What the structures we live and operate in today are a result, or they are a construct of what someone has been thinking and what someone has processed, what someone has researched, someone's worldview. So there is a call to query what we have inherited, because we've noticed that the world is full of inequity. That global public health has sort of like told us that we are trying to solve. There's a lot of inequity, and at the same time, looking at the ecosystem and the history of global health practice, there are so many links to colonialism, and the same systems that we've inherited are trying to solve problems, but at the same time, they have been part of the creation of the problem. So this is why there is need to relook into the systems that we've inherited, and this is where Decolonizing Minds fits in, where we introspect. I know, in one of the conversations that we had in our organization, someone thought that, or they were attracted by what the decolonizing global health movement was presenting, going out there, convincing other people that, these structures are out of place. And the viewpoint that we took was that, these colonial systems have had an impact on our mindsets to begin with. So if we are to reconstruct global health, and create a world that's free of inequities, then we have to go back to the mindsets. Because I'm not a scholar in psychology, but I think I know just enough to know that the way your mind is set will influence your behavior. It will influence your choices. It will impact your whole worldview. And so that's the call to sort of like introspect and try to undo some of the structures that have been instilled in us. And if I was to present this picture of some of the things that we have inherited and some of the things that we're trying to undo and fight, if you look at this picture, this is something that was extracted from a United States setting. And as I implicated earlier, that the interpretation of what needs to be done in decolonizing our minds and global health structures differs from one context to another. Is what needs to be done for a Zimbabwean is different from what needs to be done from an American point of view. And if you look at, this is an American point of view, there are so many things that there is what we see and what we frown upon. But then at the same time, there is the real impact of colonial structures within us, inside us. And it's something that's subtle and doesn't present as ugly as the iceberg, if I was to say, the iceberg that shows above the water, but there is a lot more underneath. And if you were to look at this, I just picked, a few that I could highlight upon. There is implicit bias, and none of us is immune to implicit bias. I used to think that I was one of the most racially balanced person until I took a certain test of the implicit association test, which showed me that I also have certain biases. And until I got into a certain conversation, and then someone is saying, they pointed out that, what, you've been working on this and you've been telling me that you're working on this. And I think what you just said is not true. And it's as a result of a bias that you have. And they started giving me examples, and they showed me how what I was thinking was not actually accurate. So the other thing that I highlighted here is hiring discrimination based on name. And these are some of the things that have been instilled in us. You don't need to there is no need for effort. It's something sometimes that you find yourself having done without even thinking, because they have been instilled in our subconscious. And when someone presents their CV, immediately your system responds to their name and sometimes where they come from. You get into an interview, someone's accent may may cause them to be discriminated against. There is a whole lot. And the other thing is presumption of guilt in certain settings. And if I was to continue, this is from a New Zealand perspective, and someone who constructed this from a New Zealand perspective. And I just picked a few from this picture. And one of the things that the colonialism presents as is in the form of low expectations from certain folk or certain groups, and just to point out that this is not black versus white or white versus black. The way these systems have been structured is such that we find ourselves discriminating against anyone who doesn't act or look like we do. And sometimes it manifests as racism, sometimes as tribalism, and there's all sorts. There's all sorts that we pointed out that have come out of some of our conversations. And then there's hiring discrimination that I alluded to before. And sometimes no challenge to some of the definitions and structures that are Western in courts. Like, for instance, when you're being taught global health or international health, and we don't challenge, but instead we just inherit the definitions that we've been given. And then the other thing is omission of the history of global health from curriculum. We just hope these are the problems that are presented or that we need to solve, and this is how we can solve them without presenting the history of how those problems came about. Yeah, and if you look at that picture, you can pick your own or what applies to your context. But these are the few that I thought to highlight. And then in application to global health practice and the discharge of global health and the teaching of global health, with the design of global health, there is one of the manifestations of the colonial structures that are still in our systems is something that's been defined as the missionary savior complex, or some have termed it the white savior complex. And yeah, if you look into a lot of global public health organization websites, you will find pictures that look like this. And if I'm just going to provide a definition of what this complex is, the Urban Dictionary has said that is Western people going in to fix problems of struggling nations or people of color without understanding their history, their needs, and the region's current state of affairs. Someone has referred to this as trying to solve problems from a foreign gaze. And this is one of the manifestations. And how this translates is that it rarely solves the problems. It rarely gets to the root of the problems of the people that, high income countries would be trying to help. And part of the evidence of this is, I've been questioning the impact of aid. I know if you get into the field of global public health, we have the stats that show that aid has brought about all these improvements and all towards attaining some of the sustainable development goals. But I've been questioning, and a lot of other people have been questioning the impact of aid. And I think in all of us who intend to practice global health need to question some of these structures, like is equity the overall goal of aid and some of the global public health projects that we have, and is empowering of the vulnerable the goal, because the starting point of most aid and global health projects is power imbalance. There is power asymmetry when some of these projects are implemented. These are some of the things that have emerged from the conversations that we've been having as the Swedish Organization for Global Health, where at some point we were questioning our existence to say, okay, we're trying to solve these problems, but are we balanced? And who decides what in the matrix of global public health? What we are doing, can the locals not do for themselves? What other roles can we play other than what we've been doing so far? And I think it calls for all of us who intend to function in the discharge of global public health to question ourselves and the structures in which we work in. And then some of the other symptoms apart from aid are organizational structures, where you'll find that, and this applies both ways. Like if an organization is in the global, what some people have termed the global south, it applies to people that are coming from high income countries and people that are in low income countries or low and middle income countries. There is need for all of us to restructure our mindsets. Like for instance, if I was to highlight something on organizational structures, certain positions may be ring-fenced for a certain type of people. And on the other hand, the other person may cede power because they have been programmed to think that, okay, for instance, presidency in the United States is for white people. So you realize that when Barack Obama took over as the president, something shifted in our mindsets. And to me, it showed me that, there is something wrong here. I've been programmed to think that, okay, a Black person cannot be president in a country that's predominantly white. So it's some of the things that, some of the symptoms of the structures that we've inherited. And in accessing financing channels, you realize that there is a lot of distrust for organizations that emerge from low-income countries. Like, for instance, it's easier for an organization in a high-income country to access finances, grants and financing for projects that are being discharged in low and middle-income countries than for an organization that's coming from that very same low-income country to be able to access those funds. So it's some of the things that we need to question as to why and how we can solve. And then the other thing, the other symptom is in partnerships, where you'll find that the partnerships are not structured. They're not structured equitably. There are restrictions as to who can do what within certain partnerships, of which I believe that if we were to solve some of the problems that we intend to solve, that there is need to relook into that, redefine some of those things, some of the structures that we have, the structures of the partnerships, and look for a way of for instance, someone highlighted that, okay, instead of perpetuating the fact that some of these governments and these structures, they are corrupt, they are filled with corruption, why not invest in good governance, for instance, compared to pure aid going directly to the beneficiaries through other channels, and not empowering that system, which, if corrected, could take care of some of the problems that we'll be trying to solve. So some of the things that I highlighted that can be done, and this is not exhaustive. And like I highlighted at the beginning, that my goal is to stimulate more conversations. My goal is to challenge our perceptions. My goal is for us to introspect. And these are some of the things that I've highlighted that they can be done. In the design of global public health, we need to quiz the bigger picture. We need to step back and say, what's the bigger picture of this? Instead of just me focusing on solving maternal deaths, to say, okay, what can I do to solve maternal deaths? I need to quiz the bigger picture to say, okay, what's the root cause of this? And maybe if possible, ask 10 whys instead of the 5 whys that are recommended, for root cause analysis. But go as furthest as you can in trying to get to the root cause of some of the problems. And then with some of the structures, we need to question the power structures that, this is in our minds, and because when we question these things internally, it gives us the primers for probing these structures externally, wherever we find ourselves in the district of global public health. And then in the teaching arena, the teaching of global public health, we need to question and redesign the curriculum. We need to contribute at least. Like, for instance, I just noticed that I missed an opportunity to redesign the structure of the global health curriculum at Karolinska Institute, because there was a short window, and I could have contributed to the restructuring of that curriculum, for instance, to accommodate the history of global health, which is very, very important if we are to solve some of the inequity problems we have. And then in the practice of global public health, there is need for reflexivity, a term that's used mostly in qualitative research, where you need to look at yourself from a holistic perspective before you make conclusions, before you come up with solutions, for instance, before you conclude on certain patterns that you're observing. You need to look at yourself as a person. Look at where you come from. Look at your internal biases. Look at some of the structures that you've inherited, and then after that, you might have balance if you know yourself. And one of the things that I would recommend is taking an implicit association test. And I was going to recommend something, but I thought to hold back. But there are quite a number of implicit association tests that are out there that will show you if you have a bias. For instance, when it comes to other races, other tribes, women, people that have got different perspectives from the ones you hold. And then if you know yourself, I think it's much easier to then practice more equity. And that marks the end of my presentation tonight. And I'm going to invite any questions if anyone has any, or contributions.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. Yeah, I had a problem with my internet connection. Very sorry for that. But thank you very much for being here, Phuthumani. I just wanted to say quickly to you guys before we continue with the questions that this session is recorded and is sent on live because some people were interested to join but they cannot, so this video will exist there, and I hope that everyone is okay with that. And also, if you would like to be anonymous, you can just write your question in the chat box, or if you like to just ask a question, you can just raise your hand and we will make sure of the order of the questions comes in. So does anyone have a question or a reflection or?
I can see a hand being raised. Not Hilleberg. Can you say that, Emma?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm at the bus, so I apologize for the bad sound.
No problem.
But the subject of the lecture is, of course, extremely important. And one thing that I and my friends that try to change this power structures in Sweden have discussed a lot is the dilemma between either taking part in bigger organizations and try to change them from within, or create our own with like a whole other set of values, and where the racism and the sexism and the anti-Semitism and everything is not like in the walls. I don't know if that's an English expression, but at least it's a Swedish expression. So because it's shown to be really hard to try to change organizations from within. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. This it reminded me of what I was jotting down earlier on, that when you're tackling a very big or seemingly a very big problem. Someone once said, it seems impossible until it's done. So the task usually looks insurmountable, and the temptation is to think, what change can I make? But sometimes we don't need to do much to create change. Sometimes just a simple conversation. And if you look, if just a simple conversation with someone about racism, for instance, just to talk about it, it brings about change. Because this is how we started at the Swedish Organization for Global Health. We just started a conversation. It wasn't well defined. We just said, okay, there is a problem here. It's not clearly defined, but we need to talk about it. The first meeting was awkward, and sometimes talking about some of these topics will be very awkward at the beginning. But that's how you start change. Just a conversation.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, I would like to also ask a question, please. I was thinking, also thank you very much for your highly interesting and very necessary presentation. You will speak a lot about, at the NGO level, organizations. If you think on government level, where many countries have been imposed an entirely colonial Western structure in their health systems, like building very westernized types of style hospitals, sending doctors as volunteers who don't even speak local languages, and to countries where people maybe don't even have a tradition to speak aloud about pain or things like that. How do you propose to work with changing those structures? I mean, government structures.
That's a very good question. That's a very good question, because that's at the policy level. Those are the levels that determine the structures that we find ourselves operating in. And I can propose, but some of the answers can come from the floor. Well, what we have proposed. Okay, I'll just take a leaf from what we're doing within SOGH. Is that, for instance, if there's a certain structure that we don't agree with, we will voice up about it. And I know it's a bit of a complicated picture, but because in our organizations and in whatever we do, we try to be, apolitical, but the discharge of global public health is political to begin with. We all have to say something at some point. We'll have to say something at some point. We will not agree with something at some point. And if we cultivate a culture of speaking up and pointing out the wrongs, those are some of the ways we can create change. And sometimes looking into the structures that fit into policy, like how policies are created, and then making sure that we are involved as young people and as global health practitioners, making sure that we're involved. Because at times I notice that it's easier to just inherit a system compared to trying to change it. So my proposal would be, inserting ourselves in decision-making processes. If you are into research, make sure that you push your research up to impacting policy, not just publishing a paper. If your research can go up to a policy level and implementation, the better, compared to being satisfied just, saying, I've got a paper out there, I've been cited by whoever, my altmetric score is whatever. Let's not be satisfied with that. Let's push whatever our findings are, let's push them, if possible, to policy implementation level. I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you. Yes, very much. I assume also one has to do it both sides, both research and create a culture of speaking up on the receiving side as well as on the giving side, because a gift is not free, a gift imposing. Because I often think that those so-called donors, often governments, they have set the rules already. They have set the framework, and unless they change, it's very difficult to change on the receiving side. As you say, I'm really pleased with the answer that it's creating a culture, speaking up, doing research, trying to push it to policy level and do it on both sides. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, and as well, knowing when certain policies change, because obviously you look at big countries like the US, they plan well ahead. So something that's going to be implemented in the next 5 to 10 years has already been decided. But then we know some of those decision cycles, and we have to find ways of inserting ourselves in there so that we influence, maybe, even if we don't influence policy change within these next 5 years. If you can say something, if you can contribute to something that will result in change 20 years, in 20 years' time, then I think it's worth it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I see that we have another question here. Babiria.
Thank you so much. Am I clear? Okay. Yeah, I'm talking about the issue of class because many of these good ideas, ideologies are always affected by the issue of class, that such kind of good knowledge, good information on how to change certain parts of the world is contained in a certain class of people, for example, us right now. But then we're just starting, I guess so, and so could be for the future. I look at us developing strategies, developing tools, and then creating a language that everyone can actually access and understand in all classes of people. It's global health, yes, decolonizing global health, but it's also very important for even a child who is actually thinking of becoming a doctor, a medical personnel in the future, to understand or to get access to such information prior to them even starting their school or even during their school, during their journey. Because sometimes it is, sometimes changing mindset while people are still young is actually very, very effective than actually trying to change mindset after someone has actually grown through a lot of experience and they're now they've already set their goals and objectives given in a certain way, and we think that we can change such objectives. So for me, what I would think is basically like targeting mindset. You've actually talked about it, and that's what you're presenting today. But how are we targeting mindsets? Looking at strategies, looking at tools, creating a language that is actually accessible to everyone who is actually interested in such kind of ideologies. And yeah, that's what I would actually think. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that very, very important point. Yeah, it's true that once we've grown up, sometimes it takes more energy and more complex strategies to change our mindsets. And I think obviously, one thing that I thought of, maybe that could be used at like when targeting younger people, is the is a bit controversial, because some people use this tool as you know, to feed children with propaganda, but teaching history that's holistic is one of the ways we can make sure that someone is they're fully aware of the environment, that of the structures they are likely to grow up in, and I think that can help. And maybe just to highlight that, if anyone has any contribution towards some of the questions that are being asked, please feel free to raise your hand and contribute. This was to stimulate conversation, and the conversation can go on even beyond this meeting.
Hi. I'm raising my hand. Sorry. Yeah, so no, I just wanted to say, like you say, it's very important that we talk about it, so we realize that this is actually a problem, and the more we talk about it, the more we realize that we need to take actions to it. We need to change the minds, decolonize the minds. And I wanted to take an example, for example, with the COVID pandemic, with the North and the South. Like the knowledge always has to come from the North, and the South is receiving the knowledge. They are the one learning from the North. Like, for example, when the pandemic started in China, they had a big lockdown, and this was highly criticized in Western countries. But and it was highly criticized by saying that it's a dictatorship and everything. But the countries did the same in the West. I mean, the countries in Europe did the same after a while. They also made a lockdown. So it's like, I feel like it's always that we are criticizing always when it comes from like strategies or thinking from the South, but they can also come with a solution. And another example is also with Madagascar, who was, I mean, I don't know if it's good or not, but they were talking about the plant Artemisia annua that is very good for corona, that it could be good for malaria. I mean, like there are many things we can learn from both sides, and the knowledge has to be equal. It doesn't have to come all the time from the North. That's what I want to say. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Emma.
Does anyone else have a question or a comment?
I just want to say thank you for a very inspiring talk. I feel like we've been talking a lot about this different structures and coming in from different perspectives. You have the higher structures that impact how people think, and then you also have the individual, which makes up the bigger structure, and you have the parents teaching the children, but you also have children teaching their parents, and the newer generation coming in. And it really highlights this, and you've been mentioning it in a couple of ways as well, that whatever change you can make, or whichever kind of perspective you can come from, or whichever angle you can come from, you can make a difference. And every contribution is important, and every conversation is important. And I just think it's a very inspiring and easily digestible way to approach such a huge topic. So I think it was a very good, very interesting discussion.
Thank you for that, Petra. I noticed that there's someone who has a hand up. Mimi?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sorry?
Can you hear me? Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I just wanted to say about the education system in the Western, because I'm taking my master. So I'm studying sustainable engineering management for international development. So we're very focused on this. But one thing I'm missing from this course is like another perspective, because the majority are white people who are teaching us. So we need the other side, like the receiver of the aids. And sometimes it is, I think somebody spoke about the language, and there's a certain language used, even though we want to help and improve the lower income countries. There's a certain language which is used, and sometimes it belittles the countries, saying that they don't have the knowledge, or they need white survivor to come. And what I'm missing from my course is especially that somebody raise the hand and say, hey, you actually have the knowledge. Sometimes it's the structure, as you mentioned, that makes it difficult for them to be aim for what they really want to have. So I can really, even though I'm doing the engineering, it's still a part of what you're saying that relates to the engineering part of international development. So it was very inspiring as well.
Yeah, and thank you for that point. And just to emphasize that, you know, this is a very complex subject, and it's not easy work changing something that's been going on for years, because it didn't take, you know, just a few years to instill some of the ideologies and mindsets that we have. So it's not going to take just a day to change that. And maybe one last point, just to encourage those of us that are coming from low and middle income countries. There is a lot of knowledge, there is a lot of information, even on decolonizing our minds, because it's been talked about. But some of the information that we have is not collated. It doesn't get published. Sometimes because of the structures that be. But we need to find ways of putting the knowledge that we have out there, organizing ourselves to make sure that whatever knowledge we generate is, you know, is shared with the world. Because sometimes if you're trying to write on such a topic, you look for papers and you can't find much from low and middle income countries. But these are countries that have been working on, they have worked on, they have looked at decolonizing their structures, because they were once colonized, and they've attempted undoing some of those structures, and certainly they have some information on the topic. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a last question, reflection?
I have one question. it's okay.
Yes.
I just would like to catch on to what you said, this very last, about that knowledge doesn't get publicized or published from the middle income, lower income countries, people on the ground. I would like to sort of elaborate a bit, because now we have a lot of discussions globally on climate change, and a recent discussion about keeping ecosystems biodiversity is to actually that indigenous people often sit on a huge amount of knowledge on how to preserve forests and insects and live in harmony with water, with flooding, with droughts, etc. And in agriculture, for instance, there is indigenous knowledge in many countries around the world on how to farm in drought conditions. And now we see when the drought conditions actually now are taking place in Europe and the United States of America, it's interesting to see finally that there starts to become, farmers start to become interested in what's happening in the global south, where people still survive in drought conditions, farmers. So I think in that area, we actually see a great need for collecting knowledge and publishing knowledge and starting collaborations between farmers all over the world who are actually facing the exactly same conditions, which in many cases is drought. And that to me, because I'm researching the area, is actually quite interesting to see that when there is a need, these corporations start to take place. And it will be interesting to see the same need in the global health area, and think about how does pandemics actually bring us together, and how can we learn from various areas around the world how to prevent and also how to work with it and how to change our health systems according to that.
Thank you so much for that contribution, Marie. Maybe in closing, from my end, we can continue with some of this that we're talking about online. I put a post on LinkedIn, and if there's stuff that information that you come across that you think might contribute to this conversation, you can add to that post. And there is the UN Association on Facebook where this event was being advertised. You can post your comments there and maybe even questions, and we'll continue the conversation there. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time and listening.
Thank you so much for this insightful seminar. It was really interesting discussions, comments, and reflections. And also, I want to thank you on behalf of the whole association, Phuthumani. It was really nice to have you here with us. And thank you everyone who participated to this session today. We also want to say that if you have any questions related to this seminar, you can always send us a message to our Facebook, or as Phuthumani said, to your organization or to you. Before ending this session, I would like to ask you guys if it will be okay to put on your camera so we can take a Zoom picture. Petra?
Yes, take a picture. Hello. So nice. Okay. Say cheese. Thank you so much. Beautiful.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.